Hello, AfterBuzzers. Welcome to another Spotlight On. Today, I am so excited about the guest we have in. He is no stranger to period dramas, so find out who it is right after this.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Here we go. Yes, yes, yes. This is a favorite of our guests today.
It is.
That's right. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm your host, Alina Vission, and this is another Spotlight On series by AfterBuzz. And today's guest I am super excited to have in studio. You may know him from shows like Showtime's The Tudors, where he played Thomas Culpepper, or Rain, where he played Bash on the CW network. And most recently, he plays Count Paris on ABC's new drama, Still Star-Crossed. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Torrance Coombs.
Yeah, that's like hey and hi combined. Yeah, I'm here.
I love
How's
it.
it going?
Good, good. I am so excited to have you in today, and I know your fans are off the walls, crazy
They're
excited
pretty
too.
enthusiastic.
Yes,
yeah.
we love your fans. We were just talking about them off camera. So yeah, today we really want to just kind of delve in and see who is Torrance Coombs.
Yeah, maybe I'll learn a thing or two along the way.
You might surprise yourself.
I might.
You never know.
I frequently do.
So one thing that I wanted to bring up before we get into this, I know a couple people who know you or have met you, and they all always say the same thing when your name comes up. They're like, he's so sweet, he's so kind, he's so personable, and you are. You definitely are.
Okay, so now you're one of them. If somebody asks you if you've met me.
Well, I had to judge for myself, you know.
I have to create a small army of people who like me to kind of spread the positive message. So, you know, if somebody happens to catch me on a bad day and I scream at them, then we
just go to them.
The positive
right.
stories overwhelm the negative
Exactly.
ones.
You know, you could just show them that clip right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So no, that says a lot about you. So I want to start this kind of back at the beginning for you.
Okay.
All right. So you were born in Vancouver, right?
British
Columbia.
Yes.
Canadian.
Yeah, with an American dad,
Ah.
which allowed me to traverse the border at will and come and try and seek fame and fortune. So I've been doing that for a number of years, varying degrees of success.
What were you like as a child?
You have to ask my parents. I guess I was probably a little bit dramatic. Actually, I just went to visit them in Vancouver, and they busted out. They were like pretty ahead of the curve. They had this like a big video camera, and so they used to follow me around with this huge like news team style video camera.
They were like vlogging before vlogging was a thing.
So these videos, I guess, existed on VHS, and my dad finally transferred. He digitized them, so these now could be hacked by Russians any day and unleashed to the masses. I'm a little bit nervous about it. And it looks like I was a bit of a drama king.
Drama king. From the get-go.
Yeah, yeah. So other than that, though, I cried a lot. I was a sensitive kid.
When did you realize, or when did you first start out in the performing arts? Was that something that you wanted to do? Was that something you just kind of stumbled into?
It was a bit of a stumble. I guess because I was a sensitive kid, I don't know, I was a little bit shy, and I think a lot of people, there's a misconception that actors tend to be really outgoing and like secure people, but I think a lot of people gravitate to it because through a character they can express themselves in a way that maybe they're afraid to do in their lives. So I think that, you know, my parents encouraged me to do it. I did school plays, and then drama teachers kind of along the way saw something there and encouraged me to pursue it further, and I still never really thought it would be what I did for a living. That was a bit of a dream, but it became a big part of my life and something I wanted to keep doing. So and now I'm fine. It's a form of therapy, I think.
Right.
And I'm not as shy as I used to be, and I'm not as sensitive as I used to be, and I'm not. And you know, I have a good life. You know, don't cry for me. But that's probably how I came to it. I think I was definitely absolutely terrified, and I got made fun of a lot, and then suddenly if you do a good job in the school play and somebody thinks you're worth something, and it gives you a bit of confidence.
Right. Wow. I mean, I can definitely relate to that because I got into the performing arts, ballet, when I was really young, and it was to get out of my shell. And I think probably a lot of people out there watching that can definitely relate. Was there any one moment though while you were doing all that what was like the epiphany that you were like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Weirdly enough, it's when I went to university, and I went to the university that was right by my house because my father used to be a professor there and I got free tuition. So it's like,
yeah, we'll go.
You know, so it's like, yeah, go to school, just get a degree in something and get out debt free. And I still thought I was going to go into academia. And then I saw that there was like auditions posted for theater school. And I said, well, in a couple of days, I don't really have any monologues ready, but I'll give it a shot. So I kind of crashed it and really didn't know my material as well as I should. And so very last minute, I found my way. They accepted me into the program. And I thought, if that's me not applying myself, like, what if I applied myself? Maybe I could make something of this. And it takes a little bit of arrogance to believe. They always tell you when you're in these theater classes, you're in a class of sort of 10 to 14 people, and they say, like, most of you will never make a career out of this. Most of you won't work.
Oh, wow.
And it takes a certain amount of arrogance to hear that speech again and again go, but what if it's me? What if I'm the guy that is the exception?
Right.
And I think everybody, to make it through on some level, believes they're the exception. So, and I'm aware of that, and there's
right.
I've been very lucky along the way to be where I am.
Right. So you said you were actually thinking about going into academia instead of, what were your plans before? Besides like just being a teacher, or?
Yeah, maybe both my parents were professors at various points. My mom was a lawyer for a time. I was always encouraged to just study whatever I wanted. So yeah, I just started out in the general arts education, and then things worked out this way. I kind of thought maybe I'd go into like being a coder, a programmer or something, maybe go into game design because I was a big video gamer, like a big video gamer.
Are you still?
Not as much these days. Like, when the right game gets its claws in me, you can't get me off the couch but like, we're talking, I used to play for 12 hours a day. Dang. And I used to throw my computer in the back of a van and drive 14 hours to play in tournaments. And and it was a social thing. Like me and my friends, we all did that.
So what was your go-to game?
Quake. The first Quake that was just my whole world for 5 years or something.
Check you out. Okay.
And then after that, it was Quake 3, and then a little bit of Counter-Strike. But then I started to get, as the acting stuff started to happen, I was at university. We dispersed a bit, me and my friend group, and went away to school in different cities and all that, and we just didn't play as much. And now I'm very much a casual.
Right, a casual player.
Exactly.
For fun and recreation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it. I get nostalgic about it, but I don't think I'll ever go back to that, Yeah. Those 13-year-olds, they're too good. If as soon as I go online, any game now, like Overwatch, I'm like, and I'm dead. So and I just can't.
You can't go on with that, no. I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on. You're very, 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 very busy, which we'll get into a little bit later. But going back to you learning your craft, what was some of the things that you think really helped you along? Besides, was it practice? Was it like, what did you hone in on?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that there was any one thing, but it was always encouragement of very, very dedicated teachers along the way who would stay after school and for extra rehearsals. And that's not as creepy as it sounds, by the way. That's like completely exactly what that should be. Actually, other people in my class, I've been lucky along the way to just get to know a lot of artists in various fields. And I went to this cool little school kind of in the woods out near the university in Vancouver. I went to this school called University Hill, and it's just like, it was only about 450 kids, and in that school, the theater kids were the cool kids, and they were most of the school, in fact. So there was just always artists around talking about things, and just like that kind of environment nurtures it, and it gives you the courage to just be ridiculous and try new things. And like there was never that fear of like, don't step out of line, or you've got something coming to you. It was always just very like, and then what happens if you do that? Yes, and then that. And like the improv team was huge, and like we'd sell out the auditorium for the performances. And Like it was that sort of environment. So there wasn't any one thing, and it's actually a lot like theater school and university, which is it wasn't any one technique that was like the aha moment for me. It's spending hours and hours and hours and years on end just immersed in it and thinking about it and just playing around.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how anyone gets really, really good at their craft. And that's how you become successful. It's just doing hours and hours and hours on end. Definitely. One thing that I've noticed about you in your acting skills is you have mastered the English accent. I have got to know, how did that come about? Where I mean, I knew you probably studied and learned it a lot, but you have mastered it to the point where when I found out after I watched the Tudors that you weren't from Britain, like, mind blown.
Yeah, a lot of people get really disappointed when they hear my real voice, myself included.
You got a good voice.
That all started in theater school. I guess if we're going to point to something very tangible that I learned in theater school, we did dialect class. Okay. And that's not even, because for a Canadian, a big part of that too is learning to sound less Canadian, quite frankly, because you do stand out a little bit when you do American productions, and you know.
But it's a slight difference, right?
It's a slight, but that's the tricky part. It's so slight. Most Canadians don't even realize they're doing it until they listen to their voice, recorded and played back for them, and they go, "That's what I sound like." Oh. And it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more timid, a little bit more kind of. It's got more of a lilt, and they do say, like, it's not so much oot and a boot, but it's like it's like a boat or boat. Yeah. And there's a lot of that. So just sort of like visualizing about spelled ABOWT. You know, that was like a. But at any rate, so you get a phonetic dictionary, and you get exercises just to really understand a certain language of accents. And then I did a production of Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. And for that I had to learn an English accent. But in that case, you have the script, you have the lines, and we each worked with a dialect coach, and you'd come in every week and read out all the lines, and they'd sort of pick out what sounds you're struggling with and all that. Right. And I always had a bit of an ear for it, but that really helps to sort of go, okay, you're frequently not quite going far enough with that sound. And the biggest trouble that most Americans have with that is like if you're saying the word all, to say all.
Right, because it's more like in the back of the throat, it feels like.
Yeah, and most people think they feel self-conscious to actually. You have to do that with your lips to make that noise, and in American English, we don't do that with our mouths. No. Like we don't go ool. Like you don't. No. There's no. I can't think of anything unless you're imitating an owl where you do that with your lips in American English. Right. So there's a lot of ol, which is not quite there, and that's one of the telltale sounds where you kind of. And I mean, admittedly, this is a specific English accent. There's thousands of them, and I've attempted them to varying degrees of success for different roles.
What about other accents? Have you gone through them? Kind of mastered them?
Yeah, once you can do one, you kind of get the call from your agent. So there's, so you got an audition tomorrow morning. Can you do a Russian accent? And they go like, no, but I guess I'll be there.
But yeah, I'll try. Yeah, sure.
The trick with accents, I find, is I've had auditions before. So, for example, there was a thing I auditioned for years ago where they said slight Scottish accent. So there's a great danger in anything with a slight accent, because it just ends up sounding like you don't know what you're doing. So I prefer to go with a thick accent and then kind of figure it out from there. Yeah. So but I spent so much time on this accent, I went into the room and the casting director complimented me on my great accent, and I never got a call back. Like, it's like, you can forget about the stuff that's really important if you're too focused in on the accent. Right. So the nice thing for me now with English received pronunciation is I don't have to think about it. Right. Which is maybe why I keep getting jobs doing it, because I can go into a room and turn it on, and it's not, I haven't spent the whole like 3 days leading up to it thinking about an accent. I've been working on relationship and character and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's got to be a huge benefit to you, especially going in and doing all of these period pieces where it requires an English accent.
Well, it's funny because so many Brits come on over and they play perfect Americans that you just never know.
Yeah, them and the Aussies are like amazing at doing American accents.
So they're fantastic at it. And one guy said that I was his hero because I'm the only one doing it the other way around.
I was about to say, I can't really think of anyone else who does it just like you do.
It's become I didn't mean for it to be my thing, but if somebody's gonna,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, if you're gonna offer me a job, I'll consider that.
Right. Speaking of auditions, do you remember your first audition for a television show or film?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did it go?
Not too bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so my very first one was for. I think my very first one was for a show that ended up being called maybe Kaya, I want to say.
Okay.
Maybe it was an MTV show about a band.
Okay.
I feel like that was it. I didn't get a call back, but I got it out the way and I was like, okay. And actually my second audition was for a series regular on a Canadian show called J-Pod that we were talking about. And I got it. So I was really spoiled in the early going, like, oh, that's easy.
That's it?
And now the real ratio is actually about 1 in every 100 auditions I'll book. And that's not an exaggeration. Like it's actually that infrequent. Right,
because I mean, you could look at your, your resume of what you've been working on, and especially the time periods, and it seems like you're just booking things day after day after day,
That's the appearance, when you don't see it.
But I think a lot of people out that aren't in the industry don't know, like it takes 99 no's to get that one yes.
And a common question that comes up is sort of, what attracted you to this project?
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, like
it pays, I got
it. They offered me a job.
Exactly.
I was rejected 99 times. So that's why. And, I can justify after the fact why I think it's great, but a lot of the time it's like, it's not terrible and they're paying me. Like that's most of the time what it is. And then
I got it. Because you don't see all the ups and downs that go on behind the scenes to your big roles. So I got to ask you before we start talking about your shows, were you a fan of history in school? Because you seem to play into a lot of period pieces. So
yeah, I mean, I actually, yes and no. In Canada, it's a little bit different. We had a lot of Canadian history thrown in there that I don't remember anymore.
Okay.
It's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's that history class came right after lunch, and this weird thing happened to me. It's one of those things, and the teacher was very understanding about it. But every day in social studies class, and then history class, and then it was a frequent problem, I would fall completely asleep at my desk, like full on passed out snoring, and I'd feel it happening, and I'd be doing this to my eyes,
like lots of carbs or what?
No, nothing like that. But once you've done it like twice, your body goes nap time, and it's this conditioned response to history class. And I felt terrible because I was interested. I thought it was interesting, and my teacher was not boring.
Right.
And I just had. And she even acknowledged that. She's like, I know what's going on. Like, I know you're not doing it on purpose, but you got to figure out something to do differently because this doesn't work.
Caffeine, you got to figure it out.
So I don't actually remember what I did. But maybe just being called out on it was sort of like
enough.
That jolt. But
to get you going.
Yeah.
So you weren't like a huge fan of history, I guess, as far as like, let's talk the Tudors.
Okay.
Yeah. Talking to Tudors.
I mean, that history I did learn in school. Like, we didn't learn Mary, Queen of Scots, but we learned Henry VIII and all his wives, because that's interesting to anybody.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's the truth.
Exactly.
That's the well-documented truth. Like, we know a lot.
Completely. So speaking of auditions, what was the audition process like for the Tudors?
That was actually just a self-tape from Vancouver. So a friend of mine ran a little studio, and I went to tape with her. And we spent about an hour on the thing, and I really felt like I was right for that part. And I stormed out of that studio going, this is absolute bullshit. Like, it's like I suck. I'm quitting.
Wow.
I can't. This is like, because I felt like I should be better. I felt like I was so close, but I just couldn't quite get it, and I was so frustrated with myself. And she goes, I think it's really good. And I'm like, it's not, but whatever, fine, just send it off. And then like a week later, they're like, so you, my agent called me up and said, so how do you feel about riding horses? And I'm like, I've never done it before, but I could. Why? And he goes, how do you feel about wenches in taverns? And I was like, where are you going with this? And he's like, you got the part. I was like, what? Like no callback, no chemistry test, no anything. So then I spent the next and I think I was in Ireland maybe a week after that.
Okay.
Shooting. And the whole time, that week leading up to it, I was just convinced that they were going to call and go, we got the wrong Torrance Coombs. I'm so sorry. Like, I couldn't believe my luck. It was just, and like I'd never been to Ireland. I'd never even thought of it as a place to travel.
Yeah.
I'd always dreamed of traveling for work because I'd really carved out a career in about a 10-block radius from my house, like from where I went to school or where I went to university, where I'd been doing a couple of pro theater gigs in the city, but like, and then my TV show that I had was in the city as well. And so this was like, it just blew my whole world wide open, and I binge watched the whole show. So by the time I got there, it's cool, like to have this show that is great, and then there's all the actors from it, and you just and you've put on a costume and you step onto the set of a show that you have been watching, and it's kind of surreal, and you go, it's just scaffolding, like that's not a real castle. But that was a cool thing. I was very, very nervous, and a friend of mine gave me some advice. She said, like, don't be nervous. Don't give them any reason to doubt you. Just go there and be the guy.
Isn't that the truth with like anything? Sometimes, because you get nervous about things, but it's like if they see that you have what it takes and you're there, you just gotta be like, hey. Yeah.
So even like they wanted the actor who playing that role to be a skilled horse rider, which I told them, I've never been on a horse in my life. I'm so sorry. And they said, they told me one of the reasons I got it was everybody else had said they were, and they were like, that's got to be bullshit. There's no way these guys have ever ridden a horse before. At least we know this guy's honest, so we know what we're up against.
That and you're great acting. So
yeah, of course, yes. So I got, I actually went in Vancouver. I found a stable, and I'm like, I don't want to be the first time. I don't want the first time I'm ever on a horse to be like 10 minutes before camera. So I'm gonna go take the initiative and just sort of get close to a horse and make sure I'm not terrified. Just like touch it a bit and ride it. And so I did. And but then they gave me tons of lessons over there. And,
that's great. That's definitely great. One thing that I noticed, like right as soon as you popped on screen as Thomas Culpepper, I was totally sold on your role completely. That's what got me to follow really your career.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you did an amazing job. If anyone out there hasn't seen the show, I highly recommend watching it. It's on Netflix, right?
It is on Netflix,
Yeah, so you can binge watch it. It is totally a binge-worthy show for sure.
Yeah, it did 4 seasons. It's like 10 episodes a season, and it's if you were a fan of Reign or any other period dramas and you haven't checked it out, The Tudors is like it was
amazing.
one of the early ones that kind of like set off the craze for them.
Yeah, so would you consider that your big break in America, or would you consider Reign kind of your big break?
Both. They're different kinds of breaks.
Right.
So all of the stuff I'd done before Tudors was either like a little one-liner like on Supernatural or a Canadian show that never made it outside of Canada. And The Tudors was an American show, even though I was shooting with a bunch of Brits in Ireland.
Right.
That's an American show on an American station, and it got me a fair bit of attention. It got me a little bit of an online presence, a small Twitter following, and it got me the experience where I think once Reign came along, I was like, oh, I saw that audition. I'm like, I've got this. Like, I know this world.
Right.
And I think, once you've done a couple, it becomes easier for people, casting directors, whoever, to imagine you in this world.
Right.
So I think it then led to Reign, which then was really officially the big break.
Right.
So like, it's never really, maybe for some people it is, like, I don't know, I'm sure there's some unknowns who are like now on Riverdale who are superstars, you know what I mean? But usually it's a series of steps over the course of many, many years, and just some people have seen all of the steps along the way if they happen to watch The Tudors and they liked me. And other people are sort of like, where's this guy been? I'm like, I've been working for 10 years. You just haven't, you're just not on shows that you like.
All right. And that's why we're doing a spotlight on, so you guys could know.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So and then Reign was obviously just to watch to feel the might of the marketing push, like, and to go to Times Square and see a billboard with your face on it and go, this is real.
Was
this is
that
happening.
bananas seeing
Yeah.
your face on it?
And then like,
yeah.
and just friends sending me pictures of like the bus that just pulled up in front of them and my face is on the side of it. And it's like, that's a real trip. And I tried to soak that in because you don't get that every day. And I haven't had it since. So,
Right.
but to feel that momentum, to go, like start going around to Comic-Con, to do these press roundtables, to do like, and then to feel like people are watching the show and to feel your audience growing, and then you watch your Twitter followers go from 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000 and at some point you have to turn all your notifications off because your phone's just so you're like it's just at some point you go from wanting to reply to every single person who tweets you because it's so sweet to just being actually unable to do that. And so to feel that kind of momentum and that kind of to feel like you're on something that's actually caught on, and for a Canadian kid that's actually caught on with the American audience is a really big deal. It was a wonderful feeling.
It's huge. Now, we were talking before off camera about, you know, shows that have been canceled that you've been on. So I bet to have this that lasted 4 seasons, and you were on it for what, 62 episodes on Reign.
I think that's right. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of momentum, and yeah, we'll move on to Reign. Oh, one question I had for you about the Tudors is the final scene. You get your head chopped off, and it's on a stake. What was that like to actually see the head, like your head, what it looks like chopped off?
It was cool. That was there was a whole process where they had to get a head cast of me. So they actually,
so how did that work?
They get you in this, like, they put a couple straws in your nose so you can breathe.
Right.
And then they pour this blue goop, and I think they usually use it to take like molds of your teeth for I don't know, like braces or something. Yeah, like it's that same stuff. So it initially goes on, and the thing is, you can't sort of do this or because then that's the face, your face in death, immortalized. So you kind of have to just relax as this stuff, and what happens is you're relaxing a bit, and you feel the blue goop sort of seep underneath your eyeball a little bit. You're like, oh, I didn't close my eye hard enough, and then as soon as you feel it touching your eyeball, but then it feels creepy, and you feel like you're just going to go like, stop, 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 like Fear Factor or something, and then it all just starts to solidify and gets warm, and it's not, as soon as it stops being liquid, it's no longer uncomfortable, and you just kind of sit there and you just, you know, deep breathing exercises to get through it. You have to sit there for about half an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then they kind of put paper mache on the top of it so that it all stays intact when they peel it off you, and then they kind of crack it off your face later. And I've done it for a couple things now. It's kind of fun.
That's got to be crazy, though, to see what your head would look like chopped off.
Yeah, and I have it as a souvenir. I mailed it home to my mother.
Oh, I'm sure she was thrilled.
She was. I went to the I went to the post office in Ireland, and I took the thing out. I just plonked it on the counter. I'm like, I need to send this to Canada.
They're like, okay.
Yeah, they're like.
Crazy Canadians. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
All
exactly.
right. Whatever you say.
Now, was that your first role playing an actual person who lived in history?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So how did you prepare for that?
Well, a lot of what is there in the script, but I definitely did my research on the guy, and I was like, okay, is that true? Because a lot of it wasn't, okay, who is this guy really? It was, did that really happen? Like, did a guy actually shack up with the Queen?
Right.
And he, not only that, he was like tucking King Henry into bed at night and then sneaking off to shag his wife, knowing that he'd killed his previous wives.
Yeah.
And that he would just behead people like that. Like, you have to have a set of balls on you. And
for sure.
And he does get more interesting the more you read about him. So as far as research goes, I hadn't done much before I got there. And then I got steered in the direction of some books that had some accounts of who he was.
Okay.
So he's not, because he's not a royal per se, he, you know, there's some confusion about him. For example, there were apparently 2 Thomas Culpeppers, and they were brothers. And so there's a record of Thomas Culpepper raping a woman and then killing her husband when he comes to sort of seek retribution.
Oh my.
And then King Henry pardoning him for that crime and basically just saying, no, he didn't do it, I like him. So there's a record of that. And there's a record of Thomas Culpepper being very likable, very charming, being moving quickly up the ranks at court. and being so that Thomas Culpepper should be in favor with the king, but like there's some debate about whether the rapist murderer is the same as the guy at the court, or whether it's his brother named the exact same thing inexplicably.
Kind of weird.
And apparently, I think, forgive me, history buffs, if I get this one wrong. I think it's because at the time, kids dying in childbirth or like dying young and sick was really common. Like they didn't have antibiotics, so your kid could die. So if you really like the name Thomas,
you're gonna give it to the next one.
You just want to make sure you have a son named Thomas. Like just they're all Thomas.
Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to Rain, which loved you as Bash on Rain.
Thank you.
What was that process like now, getting into auditioning for it?
So the auditioning for that was completely different. So I mentioned on Tudors it was a tape, and then they hired me, and like a week later I was there. So this was, I went in for casting for Bash in LA. And in LA, sometimes they do what's called a pre-read, where there's no camera in the room. So it's just a casting director and a script, and you read with them, and they kind of get a sense. And he was listed on the breakdown as being 17 years old. And like I was pushing 30. I'm like, this is a bit of a stretch, but maybe I can like 90210 this thing. So I shaved, made myself look as young as I possibly could, went into the room, read. And then I heard like friends of mine were getting screen tests the next day. And I'm like, okay, they're moving that quickly. I didn't get it. Fine.
Okay.
And then a month later, I was putting a friend on tape for one of the other roles. And she's like, you know, they still haven't cast Bash yet. And I was like, maybe I've got a little trick up my sleeve, which is that I have representation in Canada as well as in the US. So we went through Canadian casting and asked, I just said, we want to make sure I'm not being overlooked, because I think I am right for the role. And if you still haven't found a guy, maybe like I could. And there was no camera in the room, so I know for a fact no producer or director or anybody has seen what I did in that room. Or maybe I just had a bad audition that day. Like who knows? And they're also, in fairness to casting, they're so under the gun, and they're told to look for a certain thing, and then sometimes they're told to broaden the search. But I was already long gone. Like so, it's not. During pilot season, when they're seeing hundreds of people, it's really easy to overlook somebody. Right. So it's not like they're idiots. So I went home, I'll continue this story. So we decided to go through Canadian casting. We said, and Canadian casting had initially asked me to audition for King Henry, and I was like, but I'm a bit too young for that.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So, yeah, it happens sometimes.
It's so funny because on our last after show for Rain over here at AfterBuzz, the guy who plays John Knox actually first auditioned for the role of Conde.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it happens.
It does happen. That happened a few times along the way where they liked somebody and just sort of thought of them for another role later on. And that, when a show goes long enough, that definitely happens.
Yeah.
So I said, I can send you a tape. I said, I can do Bash or I can do Henry. They're like, you're probably kind of between ages, but I think, no, Henry's, go try Bash again.
Right.
But she's like, I don't really know. But the response to that was so lukewarm. I was like, do I really want to put myself through this? So I decided I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to bother taping. And then I went to, I was doing some acting classes in LA. So I was in the middle of acting class, and I happened to check my phone and see I had like 10 missed calls. And it was voicemails from my agent saying, like, the tape has to be in by like in an hour. Am I going to get it or not? This is your chance. Like, they really want to see it. And I was like, they really want to see it? It sure didn't sound like they wanted to see it. That was a very lukewarm response to like my inquiry. And she's like, no, they want to see it. I'm like, okay. So no explanation. I bolt out of class, just poof, gone. And I start calling everybody I know, like, who can help me tape this? And nobody's around. And finally, one of my friends said she was home and I could go over to her place, and she's a fantastic actor. So she, I already remembered the lines vaguely from a month ago. So we were able to do it, like bang out a couple takes, sent it off, boom, just in time. And then the next day they got back, said like, nah, not quite right.
Really?
And I was like, oh, okay, never mind then. And then about a week later, I got a call from my LA manager saying, they want to see you after all.
Wow.
And so they said, the LA casting wants to see you again, so you'll go in and tape with them. So I said, okay. And then I show up to tape with LA casting, and there's only one other guy in the waiting room. And I go into the room, and it's like, the producers and the director and the writers, and like I'm like, oh, this isn't on tape with casting. This is like, we're in the final stages here. And then it was one of those auditions. Sometimes you're in there and you just have the feeling like, I think I got this. Like they were really, really enthusiastic. They were just really, and sometimes they're super disinterested and you get it anyhow, but usually you get this little kind of spidey sense that you did a good job when somebody's not just telling you you're great.
Right.
So I felt that, and then about 5 minutes after I got out of there, I got a text from my manager saying, yeah, you got a screen test. So, because usually in America, unlike in Canada, there's one last stage after all of this, which is the screen test, which is like you've got a contract already drawn up, and now you've got to audition one last time for a room full of network execs. Very intimidating.
The suits.
So if your nerves can get in the better of you, even if you're totally the right person, like it's a very intimidating thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, here we go. And then a week maybe passed, and I'm like, so when's the test going to happen? She says, Monday. I said, okay. So I just kind of went off, and I was in the middle of nowhere, just with some friends of mine, and I got a call from my manager saying, "Are you anywhere near a fax machine?" I'm like, I could not be farther from a fax machine. Why?
Right.
And she's like, "Well, just get to one and then call me back." And so I started to get this. I bet there's something to this. And then she said, "Yeah, there's no one. You're not testing against anybody. They're just going to use the tape that you made the other day, and the role is yours."
Wow.
So I did get to a fax machine and signed, and then.
That is
had a little quiet celebration to myself.
Yeah, that is such an awesome story, and it just goes to show that tenacity and really believing in yourself, I mean,
it wasn't, I'm not a super tenacious person. It wasn't like I was like, hey, like, get them on the phone.
No,
I'm right for this. But it was
though.
just sort of like a month later, I'm like, they still haven't found the guy. I kind of felt like maybe I'd be good for that.
Yeah.
And then actually, one point I forgot to mention, I'd been trying really hard to look young. They said before my last audition going in, they said, grow your scruff out. Just like look a little rough around the edges.
Right.
Because the guy's he's supposed to be kind of roguish, you know?
Right, yeah.
And I was looking a bit too clean cut, I guess, in the effort to look young. And so I kind of like came with my, like most of my shirt undone, chest hair hanging out, like some scruff on my face and messy hair. And I guess that did it. That was the look. Yeah.
That is awesome.
They're like, yeah, okay, he's not 17, but whatever.
It'll still work.
Yeah, it's fine.
Like you said, we're going to 90210 it.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have a fan question that I want to pose to you. So this is from IGM Dillons, I believe, on Twitter. If your character Bash were to have come back on Rain, what would you have liked his storyline to be?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Because people were distraught that I was too, that he didn't come back.
Of course.
4.
Well, I don't. Maybe we'll address this later in the interview.
Let's
like
do
you know,
that.
I'm totally comfortable talking about that.
Okay, you are.
Yeah,
okay.
it's fine.
Okay.
But as for the question at hand, whatever it is, he left saying he'd be back to help Mary out, and in my head, I was imagining, like before any of us knew what that was. There's a few things that maybe could have been. I know certain things that were explored by the writer's room that didn't end up coming to fruition for various reasons, and I can't really talk about those. That would be up to them to divulge.
Okay.
But I guess what I could say is I wish that I think that as stuff was going down with Darnley and with Bothwell, both of whom in real life turned out to be sort of nasty pieces of business, that he could have perhaps helped with that, or maybe orchestrated Darnley's murder in some way. You know, just kind of working behind the scenes, as he always does because he's not in the history books.
Right.
Working behind the scenes to make sure history goes as it should.
Yeah.
So I thought it might be something like that, where, you know, not to rekindle the love between them, but there's something that he's always just going to be her protector in some way.
Yeah, he's always looked out for her.
Yeah.
And we definitely missed it season 4.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. What do you think it was about that character of Bash that people just fell in love with?
It's a good question. I guess at first, like after the pilot, I know he was originally positioned as kind of this a bad boy with a heart of gold, which is always a very appealing kind of character. So that tends to lure people in, I think. And then he actually ended up not having that much of an edge to him at all in the end. Like he ended up just being like fiercely loyal and sort of like falling in love with one person at a time. Like, so as much as he had this reputation of being a flirtatious bad boy, he didn't do a lot that was terribly bad. Like, other than, you know, maybe like pushing a guy off a cliff isn't the nicest thing ever. Like, you know, he'd do, so his murderous tendencies were a bit bad boy, but he wasn't a philanderer as such. And I kind of thought he was going to be more of that. So I was thinking in the early going, I'm like, should I be flirting with people more? And they're like, no, it's Mary. Like, okay.
Okay.
Interesting. So, but I think there's something about his good nature and his loyalty. And because he wasn't beholden to sort of looking after a country, he didn't have that burden.
Right.
He was free to love freely and just be himself. So I think people find that appealing. In this kind of stuffy society where people have these roles to play, he wasn't really stuck in any of that.
Yeah, definitely. I found a question on Twitter, and I don't know if I have it from a certain person, but they actually posed a question, because you do play in a lot of period dramas. What's the best thing about the costumes, period costumes, and what's the worst thing? Okay.
They're all different depending on the show.
Okay.
And you learn that. Like, as much as, I've done all these period dramas, when you do a few, you come to appreciate the nuances between them in tone and in style and in everything. So, I guess the best thing about them is they kind of give you this cool posture. You put them on and you immediately feel cool in a way that, like, when you do a modern day thing and you're just wearing a t-shirt and jeans like I am now, there's nothing to really get you into the mindset of a character or to change the way you walk. Like, you have to be more deliberate about it. And there's something about putting on a costume from a different time period that informs the way you move and the way you speak and the way you behave. So I like that about it. It gives me something to work with.
And the worst part?
The worst part is that they can be really uncomfortable. Like, and they're not sympathetic to, they're all about looks and not particularly sympathetic to the temperature that you're shooting in. So in Spain, like, these guys are wearing these big woolly cloaks and it's like 120 degrees out in this square that's just bouncing the heat off like an oven. Or in Toronto, we were really up against it with the cold a lot of the time, just the endless snow and cold. And so just as an example of something like that, I couldn't wear a hat because they sort of go, it obscures your face too much, and it looks silly. Like, there's no such thing as a hat from that time period that looks cool and that isn't a total distraction. So as a result, but like, what happens is your ears freeze and you get a headache, and that doesn't go away all day, and then it gets really miserable. And the best protection I have is this sort of boiled wool cape that I'm pulling on all the time, and then I've just got layers and layers of silks. And so the flip side of that is that you get really sweaty underneath, but you're still cold everywhere. So, and just long days, and then if they got to cover you in fake blood or something, like, it's so uncomfortable. I just dreaded those days. I was just like, I just actually, somebody stab me to death for real today. I don't want to do this scene.
But hey, you got to.
You just use it, right? You use it, you get it, you use that anger and frustration and just channel into screaming in pain or whatever it is.
Exactly. So let's talk about, Bash and not coming back, since we brought that up earlier. I know a lot of fans, especially that, we communicate with, that watch the after show, they really, really wanted Bash to come back. And so did I. It was definitely, we're missing him season 4. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. I mean, I can tell it. I can tell you from my end.
Right.
Like, you might get a different story from producers, because I did deal through my agents on this, so I don't know what was said in the in between. But basically. I was looking down the barrel of a 4th season where she was going to have a couple more husbands. They were going to have Scotland, England, and France coming, and I was already feeling a little bit squeezed in terms of, like, there seemed to be episodes where storylines, like, they were kind of trying to figure something out for Bash to do because they had other more important things to be dealing with. And I was looking at it, I'm like, there's just so many new characters. Like, this character is a little bit of a relic of her time in France.
Got it, right.
And I just felt like the story was going to be moving beyond him, and that we were going to continue to struggle to find things for him to do. And so I asked to be let out, and they were very generously let me out of my contract, which they don't have to do. And if they'd said, screw you, stay, I would have done that and happily done that. But
right.
in that sense, it's a mutual decision. But I did initiate the request to leave. And it wasn't because I didn't love the show. It's just because I thought that it had moved a bit beyond me. And there's no malice in that. It's just the way of things.
Right.
And then what happened was I made sure that whatever new thing I got it put in my contract that they had to let me go back and guest star on Rain. So we actually had that. So I didn't leave Rain for Still Star-Crossed, which is a bit of a misconception that's out there.
Right.
So I left it for nothing.
Okay.
And Still Star-Crossed happened to come along, and I was like, I wasn't going to do another period drama, but it's like Shonda Rhimes, Spain.
It's Shondaland,
and quite frankly, a very different sort of character to be playing, so it made sense. So I said yes to that, but we made them put it in there that they had to, in good faith, let me go back and do some Rain. And then what happened is Rain, of course, as I predicted, had a ton going on. And so it never quite happened. Like, they just sort of ran out of time. And I think if there had been a 5th season, Bash would have come right on back.
Yeah.
Because I know that, they kind of found out that they weren't going to get that 5th season, like, very close to the end. They had like 3 or 4 episodes, and they had a plan in place to finish it up, but they also had a more fun plan in place to stretch it out for another season. And exactly how Bash would fit into that, I don't know. And then I actually didn't know how they would have written him back into it. So when I was watching the show, because I continued to watch it with everybody, I was like, oh, that's what look what Bash did. Like, he shows, like, he's helping her out. He's not on screen, but he's
he's still helping.
Yeah, it's not like. And then there was another thing that people were tweeting at me, like, is Bash going to come back for the finale? Is he going to be back? Is he going to be back? Yeah, that was a
big question.
And I wasn't trying to be an asshole on that. I want to set the record straight on this one. I couldn't answer that because what happens is they'd sent me a thing a request for permission to use footage that we'd already shot in the finale. Right. So technically I knew that Bash was going to appear in it, but I didn't want to say yes and steer people into thinking that there was some new scenes or new content coming up. Right. So, like, because technically, but I also didn't know what that appearance would be or how much he would be in there. Right. So for all I knew, it would have been like a substantial flashback, but he was in there. Right. So, but that's why I couldn't be more upfront about that and say I wasn't trying to lead people on and make them think that I had some big storyline coming up. So, but I did feel bad about that.
It's all good. I mean, I think all of us fans were hoping for a season 5, and especially because Mary was in need of Bash's help for that season. So it would have been awesome to see you guys in that and all of that. But let's talk about Shondaland now. Sure. Yeah, Still Star-Crossed on ABC, playing Count Paris. Yeah. Yeah. So this just kind of fell in your lap right after you left Rain for the most part?
Yeah, you know what's funny is it again, so I knew I was going to be leaving Rain, so then immediately the search begins for the next job because you start panicking. You're like,
you got bills to pay.
Yeah, you're like, I'm actually doing this, am I? Okay. Who thought this was a good idea? Yeah. And then so I went through a pilot season. I auditioned, I think, for something like 30 pilots.
Wow.
It was a lot. That's not like in about a month and a half, I had that many auditions. And none of them quite came through, like things kind of close here and there, but it was all like, and when you have that many, it's hard to focus enough on figure out which ones you love. So I'm not complaining, by the way. That was an amazing year. And then sure enough, after all of those had said no, along comes Still Star-Crossed to sort of say like, oh yeah, and like the last pilot of the season, hadn't quite finished casting yet. Yeah. And it came together pretty quickly. Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to say that I pick and choose my projects, but sometimes something drops in your lap and you're just like, well, of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about working on this show. One thing that really stood out to me from the get-go, the diversity of the show. And kind of speak on that. Speak on what it's like to have diversity in a show, especially a period piece show, because we don't really see that a lot.
Yeah, we don't. The initial response I had, if I'm being honest, is like, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
But that's, I guess, from my years of doing period dramas and the sort of conditioning we have to think of them in terms of like white European casts. But really, like, we're all kind of like, none of us is Italian. I'm no more Italian than anybody else. So I do think that what's neat about it is once you see it on screen, you just go with it, you accept it. And that was actually something, once I'd spent time with that cast and seen the show, all the other period dramas I've done feel really conspicuously white to me now, I have to say. Especially if you're already going to be delving into the realm of fantasy. Right. Like, I feel like it should happen more. It is a risk, and some people didn't quite like it, or it confused them, because the other thing that it did was there was no deliberate attempt to say, for example, the Montagues are white and the Capulets are black, because you don't want to turn it into a race war. It's a family war. Right. But as a result, because both families are completely mixed race, I think there was an element of the audience was a bit confused as to who's who and which family. Oh, that guy's not related to that guy. Okay, like there's a little bit of that in the early going, and it took a sec to sort out.
Yeah, we were talking before we came on that it takes about 2 of the episodes to really see who is who and what's going on and what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot thrown at you. And the challenge, of course, was to, I mean, most people know the story of Romeo and Juliet, but on the off chance somebody's watching this thing and doesn't know it, you want to give them just the little end of that story. Exactly. It's based on a book, actually, and the book quite brilliantly begins like a couple weeks after the events, maybe a couple of months. But it's
did you read the book prior, or?
Yeah, I did. Okay. I read it, and I read it. I read it and then gave myself some time and didn't reference it again, because the show turned out to be something a little bit different. I mean, the events in the book and the show run parallel a lot, but the way the characters speak and the exact, like Count Paris doesn't show up in the book until about like 3/4 of the way through it. Okay. So it's not like there wasn't a lot of character to draw on in there. Right. You know what I mean? So like the show is something. I just took what I could from the scripts. Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. I have a fan question from Nazli Hassan _Hassan. What is your favorite part about playing Count Paris?
Well, it's fun. It's fun to play a bad guy. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Especially fun to play a bad guy that you get people to trust you a little bit and then turn on them. It's a lot of fun. Right. Yeah.
So for future roles, would you rather play a villain than a good guy?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. My wife, we watched the latest episode, and she turned to me. She goes, like, "You got to play more villains."
You do good.
It's fun. It is fun, because when in life do you get to just be like a total asshole to people and not suffer the consequences? Right. It's cathartic. It awakens a darkness within you. Yeah. But then I can just put it all away and be nice again.
Exactly, be Torrance, you know? One thing I definitely wanted to ask you, we're about to wrap up, but you come from a theater background, and there is somebody on here that says, Mastero _Corn Cobb says, do you miss theater work, and do you ever plan to return?
Yeah, I do miss theater work. I always thought I'd be a theater guy that kind of did film gigs on the side. Right. Like living in Vancouver, kind of doing the theater, and then picking up a gig on Battlestar Galactica here, Supernatural there. And that's what it was to begin with. And then TV started coming along, and not only that, I was apprenticing when I was doing theater. I was doing messengers and things, and a couple of great roles, but theater tends to be a veteran's game. And what I was learning is that in television, like, it's a young man's game. So that was, it was nice to have those opportunities and to be doing original scripts. So when you've done Shakespeare enough times, you go, I'm not originating this anymore. Everybody knows exactly what happens, so my challenge is to find something new in this and authentic. Whereas on TV, it's like, this is brand new. Nobody's seen this before. I get to originate this character. I get to be a part of a brand new show, and that there's an appeal to that no matter what medium it's in. If I got to do like a brand new play, that would be cool too. Right. And I'd love to go back to theater if I could make the timing of it work. Okay. I almost did it last year, but it fell through.
Well, now you got TV shows and everything galore. So we're about to wrap, but what else? What's coming up on your plate? Getting into, would you ever get into producing or directing or writing?
Yeah, writing is not my strong suit. I would love to. I mean, I thought about sort of pulling a Megan Follows and asking to direct an episode.
She did amazing.
She did amazing, but like I'm still a little bit timid with that. Like, but really, if I was going to do it, that was the show. Like, I know that crew, I know that cast, so that train has sailed. But I think producing is something I could see myself getting behind.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And any other projects that you're working on right now that you want to plug, talk about? Where can we see you?
There's not much to see me in for the next little while. I've been focusing with my wife Alyssa. We run a style and travel blog. It's mostly her baby, but I'm her photographer. Yes. And together we travel the world, and we
the A-list, right?
It's called the A-list.
Yes.
The A-list.me.
Check it out, everyone.
And so there's travel guides and style guides, and all that stuff. So yeah, we've been all over the place. She gave me for our first wedding anniversary, she gave me a book of our first year together, just like a photo album,
that's
actual printed photo album, which is a rarity these days. And I'm flipping through it, I'm like, we had a year, didn't we? Like we were in Spain and Iceland and Paris and London and Denmark and Napa, Santa Barbara. Like we've just been all over the place. So we've got some trips coming up, and
it's called living life.
Yeah, we were just in Cabo, and then Toronto, then Vancouver, like in the last couple weeks. So we have been living the life. It's been charmed, and I'm sure it'll dry up any minute. But for now, we'll just. It will.
You're talented. She's talented. It's going places. Trust and believe.
Well, I know the blog won't be drying up. The blog is growing, which is really exciting for us.
Now I'm just excited to see where that blog goes, and I'm excited to see where your career goes, because I really do think the sky is the limit for you.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because Still Star-Crossed, we finished that up in November, and we're back to it now. We're back to waiting for the 1 in 100.
Back to the grind.
Because you sort of think, that's the other thing, just to close it off, I guess, is that you sort of think at every tier, okay, I've made it now. Finally, the offers will be pouring in any minute. And then no, you go to the audition, and then I see really famous people at my auditions too. You're like, wow. It's like, it never ends.
Never ends.
You go back to the grind.
It is a grind and a hustle out here.
Think about how many famous people you know. And so you go, oh, so-and-so would be perfect for that role. It's like, guess what? So would 50 of the other ones that you also know. Like, it's that competitive, So you just have to be patient, keep a positive attitude, and hope you get lucky.
Love it. Love it. Well, where can the good people find you online?
I'm on Twitter, at Torrance Coombs. I'm on Instagram, Torrance Coombs.
Yes.
I have a Snapchat. It's like Torrance_Coombs, but I don't really use it that much anymore. So, like, don't expect a ton of content there.
It's just the Instagram, the Twitter. Go follow him, because he's absolutely hilarious on both. And you guys can follow me on all social media at Alina Vision. I want to thank you so much for coming in and spending your afternoon with us. I'm sure the fans are extremely excited to see you and hear what you had to say, and so was I. So best of luck to you in everything you do. And anytime you have another project, please feel free to come in and chat with us about it.
I think I will. All right.
Take me up on it. All right. Until next time, I'll see you guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.